الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على حبيبنا وسيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين. أما بعد، رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Dear respected people, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to another episode of An Ayah a Day Shows You the Way. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, we'll be exploring today the 12th juz of the Quran, more specifically Surah Yusuf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ودخل معه السجن فتيان قال أحدهما إني أراني أعصر خمرا وقال الآخر إني أراني أحمل فوق رأسي خبزا تأكل الطير منه نبئنا بتأويله إنا نراك من المحسنين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in translation of this ayah, and two young men entered with him into prison. One of them said, I see myself pressing wine. And the other said, I see myself holding above my head bread from which birds were eating from it. Nabbitna bi ta'wili, inform us with its interpretation of its interpretation. Inna naraka min al-muhsinin, indeed we see you of those who do good. Now, before I explain this ayah, inshallah, I just want to give you some context. This is obviously referring to Yusuf alayhi salam when he was put into prison. But I want to kind of go into the backdrop of why he was put into prison, and I want to go into this quite quickly because there's so much detail, subhanallah. So we know that Yusuf alayhi salam, he was purchased by an aziz, someone powerful, like a minister. And this minister, he noticed that Yusuf alayhi salam wasn't like any other normal child. So therefore, he didn't take him as a slave. He took him as someone close to him. So he said to his wife, Akrimi mathwa, honor his residence. I give him a good place to live, to stay, to dwell, and that's what she did. But then the story takes a very weird and violent turn, subhanallah. She tries to seduce Yusuf alayhi salam. And she does this, she tries again and again and again. And you can tell this just from the wording of the ayat, that she was trying so very hard to seduce Yusuf alayhi salam. And Yusuf alayhi salam, in return, was referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, until it got to a stage where she basically was so desperate for Yusuf alayhi salam, she started to chase him. She locked the doors, and when she tried to lock the doors, Yusuf alayhi salam was running. So as they're running now, both of them, they come to meet in front of them. Who's standing in front of them? The Aziz, the minister. And who's in front of the minister? Yusuf alayhi salam and the wife of the minister. So now automatically, when people are very guilty and they don't have it in them to admit their mistakes, they blame the other party. So that's exactly what she did. Oh no, he tried to do this and he tried to... And so then later on, what happened was, it was said that if Yusuf alayhi salam's shirt was ripped from the front, then it means he was the aggressor. Because when your shirt is ripped from the front, it means that the other party is defending themselves and the aggressor is coming forward. But on the other hand, if the shirt was ripped from the back, then it means Yusuf alayhi salam was running away from her and she was trying to grab him. And it was later discovered that Yusuf alayhi salam's shirt was actually ripped from the back and she was the guilty one, and the Aziz, the minister, recognized this. Then word got out that the woman of the minister, the wife of the minister, she was seducing her young man, the servant, Yusuf alayhi salam. So then what did this evil woman do? She got all of these women from, and you have to kind of imagine, use imagination for this moment. It wasn't just any random women. Because she's the wife of a minister, it also kind of, if you use your imagination, she has friends from that similar background too, who are other perhaps wives of other ministers in that kind of political space, in that elite class. So these women come, and then you have the famous account of when she gives, a knife to each of them, and when they saw Yusuf alayhi salam come, they cut their hands and they said, this is like an angel, he's so beautiful, etc. And then the wife of the minister, she says, that is what you were blaming me for. SubhanAllah. In other words, she's saying, do you blame me for committing such a evil act and crime, meaning being disloyal and unloyal and unfaithful to her husband because of how this man is? I.e., there's no criteria of action. And you learn as well that if we look in today's reality, when people have money and power, but there's no criteria of action, good or bad, look at Jeffrey Epstein. Money and power, right? And look what he was doing. Similarly, the wife of the Aziz, money and power, look what she was trying to do to Yusuf alayhi salam. She's trying to groom him. She was trying to groom Yusuf alayhi salam. Look at Harvey Weinstein. Again, someone with a lot of money and power. A lot of money and power. What did he do to women? So it's the same thing, subhanAllah, that when people have a lot of money and power and there's no criteria for their action, it's just raw desire, then these are the things that subhanAllah happen. So anyway, she then says that if he doesn't do what I ask him to do, which is an illegal sexual act, I'm going to put him in prison. So Yusuf alayhi salam was put in prison. And something else which must be learned here, this isn't just why he was put in prison. Again, use your imagination, try and understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to do when he's drawing this picture of the ayat here. 2, when the word got out that the minister's wife was trying to seduce Yusuf alayhi salam, of course, there's no honor amongst thieves, meaning that this word could also spread outside of the palace. Oh, the wife is, she of the minister is doing this scandal, etc. So the fact that also Yusuf alayhi salam had to be put into prison was to perhaps also show the public that it was Yusuf alayhi salam who was the aggressor. So that's how they kind of saved face of their political class and the elite class. Similarly, what people do today. Make up lies, and the innocent is the one who gets persecuted, and the guilty is the one who's let off. So now Yusuf alayhi salam is in prison, and this is where it brings us in today's ayah. So 2 young men, fatayan, and just to mention now some Arabic points, the word fata is the singular form of the word fatayan being used here. Fatayan is the dual form, and subhanAllah, you see that there's a linguistic connection between the word fata and afta and the word which we know is mufti. The mufti is the one who can produce legal verdicts regarding Islam. This is halal, this is haram, etc. In other words, he is able to give you legal rulings. Now, the word fata doesn't mean young boy, it means young man. But look at the position of the Arabic language. Young man, why is it fata? Is because at that age, when you've come out of childhood and if you entered now into manhood, you're able to decipher between good and bad. So this is why it's called fatayan. The word fata means someone who's young, but he's still baligh, because he can decipher between good and bad. Similarly, the mufti can give verdicts because he's of sound mind. He knows what's good and bad. He can decipher. Such can the young man. So one of the young men, he says, I saw myself pressing wine. And this is referring to a dream he had. The other one, he says, I saw myself carrying bread over my head and birds were eating from my head, basically. Nabitna bita'wili, tell us of its interpretation. Indeed, we see you to be of someone who does good. Now, firstly, I'd like to mention, they're in prison. Prison is not a polite or nice place. It's a very ugly and dark place. And in prison, everyone has the same uniform, the same facilities, the same schedule, the same routine. It's not like Yusuf alayhi salam had written on his t-shirt or whatever he was wearing at the time in the garment, I am someone who does good. So, how did they recognize that he is someone who does good? They recognized that he was someone who does good purely from the way he carried himself, from the way he was, from the way he was nurtured. Because subhanAllah, in the later ayat, it says, وَاتَّبَعْتُ مِلَّةَ آبَائِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ. He's saying to them later on that I followed the religion of my forefathers, Ibrahim, Ishaq, and Yaqub. In other words, Yusuf A.S. came from a legacy which nurtured him into the person he was at that time. He came from a legacy of Anbiya. And Anbiya, they don't do what criminals do. They don't lie, they don't cheat, they don't steal, they don't fornicate, they don't speak bad about people. Their standard and status of action is so high that they become distinguished from normal human beings. So what's a lesson that we learn, subhanAllah, just from this? We learn that us as Muslims today, we're also living in very similar circumstances. We almost live like in a prison. Islam, you can't practice Islam freely. You can't say certain things about Islam without being attacked. So it's like a prison for us. But we cannot now adopt the same behavior, same values, same beliefs, same mannerisms as the rest of the people in this prison. Why? Because the same way Yusuf A.S. came from a legacy of Anbiya, of a high standard of character and behavior, a higher purpose, we come from the greatest legacy, which is the legacy of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We come from the greatest legacy because we have the best book given to any nation, Kitabullah al-Quran, the book of Allah, the Quran. So, what does this mean? In our daily lives, we must hold ourselves to the standard of Islam and not to the standard of society, right? Because when we hold ourselves to the standard of Islam, over time, as you can see, subhanAllah, the world is sadly breaking apart. The same way these people were troubled by these dreams, we have people who are troubled today by life's problems. Human beings who are troubled, who do they come to for solutions? They come to muhsineen, those who are doing good, those who are carrying Islam, those who are embodying Islam. But now, if we are those who take on the current behavior of the current way of life of the world today, then we're not distinguished. So if we're not holding ourselves to a higher standard, how can humanity place their hope in us? They can't, because we're like everyone else. But Yusuf A.S., he exemplified a different level of character when he was in prison. He had the same uniform as them. They were in prison. But he was different. He was different from his belief, different from his outlook, different from his mannerisms, different from his character, different from his speech. And this is what we must understand from this ayah here very clearly, that regardless of our circumstances, regardless of Yusuf A.S.'s circumstances, he held himself to the standard of Islam. The Islam, i.e. submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and following the religion of his forefathers. Ourselves too, we must hold ourselves to the standard of Islam. Because when the world is troubled, they will seek solutions from us, just how is happening today. When people want true guidance, when people want true peace, when people want true understanding of the world's purpose, who do they turn to? They turn to Islam and the Muslims. They don't turn to anyone else. So I pray, inshallah, this point was made very clear. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be of those who are changing society and are not changed by society. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who constantly remember our legacy so we can hold ourselves to the standard of Islam and not the standard of the current world we live in today. All good was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all bad was from me. Overlook my shortcomings. And bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of An Ayah a Day Shows You the Way. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.